the President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
He has won. A political earthquake delivers Donald Trump to the most powerful position in the world, President of the United States, leader of the free world.
Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will.
In 72 days' time, Donald J. Trump will move into the White House to become this country's 45th president. Good evening from Washington. America's pendulum has swung right back from the country's first black president to a man at times so extreme that respected leaders of the very Republican Party for which he ran deserted his candidacy in droves. It is the country's Brexit moment, in which half the people have said we have come too far and half have said not far enough. Reaction is riven between despair and joy, with little in the middle. But President Obama has been quick to try to start the healing.
We are now all rooting for his success in uniting and leading the country. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. And over the next few months, we are going to show that to the world.
Also tonight, we are live here in Washington, in New York, and in the crucial state that helped win it for Donald Trump, Florida.
We came to Florida because this state, split between Hispanic voters and white voters, was expecting to vote for Hillary Clinton. But we got it wrong, and we witnessed Hurricane Trump rage across the United States, tearing into the firewall of Clinton's blue states. But even in their victory, some Trump supporters showed vitriol.
And we spent the night here in New York in a victory party venue with a glass ceiling meant to serve as a metaphor for a Hillary Clinton win. But this was no breakthrough, rather a shattering defeat. In the last few hours, she's made an emotional speech pledging the Democrats will continue the fight for diversity, equality and unity.
It is the most seismic shift in U.S. politics for a generation, a firm rejection of what Donald Trump called the Washington elite, leaving the fate of the world's greatest superpower in the hands of a maverick billionaire businessman. Brexit plus was Trump's prediction earlier this week, and despite all the pollsters and the analysts saying otherwise, that was exactly what the American voters delivered. Matt Fry is in Florida, one of the key swing states captured by Mr. Trump last night. Matt.
John, one simply cannot underestimate the size of this earthquake that has shaken American politics. It is one of the biggest upsets in the 230-year history of this country. Because when Donald Trump started on his journey, he really was the improbable candidate. And he has sort of, for many people, become the accidental president. And what he's done is really tear up the political rulebook, overturn the logic of American elections, how you fight them, how you campaign, what you can say. And truly, John, to half the country, his victory is proof that you can be a bully and you can be a bigot in this country of rules and norms and customs and get to the highest office in the land. That is not what the majority of Americans has expected, and it is what so many members of his own Republican Party absolutely deplored. So think of it like this. The story of Donald Trump is that classic American story of someone overcoming obstacles to win, but not in a way that anyone here had ever seen before.
At the beginning of next year, Donald Trump will live and work here. Take it in. The Donald has become the president. In Manhattan, the city he calls home, the ultimate compliment for the billionaire builder. His unmistakable face leering from the Empire State Building. Trump's improbable journey from fantasy power on television to real power in the Oval Office began 18 months ago. He wore his total lack of political experience like a badge of honor. But from tomorrow, the homework begins and he'll receive the same security briefings as the incumbent president. Last night, this was his pageant. He was crowned Mr. Universe. During the poisonous campaign, Trump was very good at being bad, but in victory, his speech was remarkable for being gracious.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard. Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time, and we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. Have to get together.
But will they get the message? This has become the familiar rallying cry of the Trump campaign, all the more chilling now that he's won. We spent the evening with hundreds of his supporters in a hotel ballroom in St. Petersburg, Florida. They'd only booked the room for 2 hours, expecting swift defeat. But with every new victory, they couldn't believe they were making history. Almost every pundit, pollster and political scientist had got it wrong. Polling clearly needs to take some time out. It was their anger against all things establishment that Trump managed to channel and mold. A coalition of voters, mainly white, some Latinos, men but also women. Blue collar, white collar, even dog collar. Because they didn't show up in the polls, they were called the shy Trump supporters, a contradiction in terms.
I felt it in my soul that he was going to win. Yes.
What do you think should happen with Hillary Clinton?
Jail! Jail!
What about standing up for decency? Donald Trump has not always been a decent candidate.
Well, but you know what? As I understand, he already accepted the Lord Jesus, and so whatever he did before, the Lord has forgiven him. We have to move forward.
We are going to win again, just like Mr. Trump said.
And will you hold him to all the things that he's promised, like building the wall?
Yes, I believe he will. I believe in Donald Trump, and I believe he will.
The night was so bad for Hillary Clinton, she waited till day to give her speech. She had all the political smarts, but lacked the visceral connection with the voters that made all the difference. Bill Clinton looked on like a ghost.
Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead. Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power. And we don't just respect that, we cherish it.
Soon, Donald Trump will reside in a mansion that does not bear his name. He will tread on the same floors as Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Obama.
Good afternoon, everybody. We all want what's best for this country. That's what I heard in Mr. Trump's remarks last night. That's what I heard when I spoke to him directly, and I was heartened by that. That's what the country needs.
It depends on President Trump whether that's what the country gets. This election has exposed an ugly, dark side of America and its democracy. The next 4 years will show just how much the brand has been tarnished.
And by the way, Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote by about 2,000 votes, but she lost 200,000 votes, excuse me, but she lost the Electoral College, that all-important Electoral College, and she lost it very handily to Donald Trump. So there was no argument, there were no disputes, the lawyers stayed at home. But here's the supreme irony of this result. Throughout the campaign, Republican officials were telling me over and over again that Donald Trump wouldn't just not get into the White House, but he would also bring the entire Republican Party down with him like a sort of political Titanic. What's he done instead? He's increased the majority of the Republicans in the House. He's increased the majority marginally in the Senate. He's in the White House. He is now in a position of power that is almost supreme in this country and can fundamentally change the way America is run, the politics that are introduced, and indeed also the Supreme Court positions that will probably become vacant. That is a very big deal, John.
Matt Fry in Florida. Well, let's look at how Donald Trump pulled off this remarkable electoral triumph. The Republicans won 47.5% of the popular vote. That's actually a slightly smaller share than Clinton, but Trump got the votes where it counted, winning him enough states to outscore Clinton in the Electoral College. With just 3 states left officially to declare, he currently has 279 votes, enough to guarantee him the presidency. He squeezed past Clinton in Florida, key swing state that brought him 29 of those college votes, but he also won in Pennsylvania, in the industrial heartland of the American Northeast. And he just snatched Michigan, the first Republican presidential candidate to take the state since, well, 1998. In the Senate, the Republicans retained a narrow majority despite some Democrat gains. The story repeated in the House of Representatives. So they now, as Matt just said, have control of both the executive and the legislative arms of government. Well, joining me now are 2 Republicans, the former chairman of the campaign in Virginia, Corey Stewart, and Tara Setmar, who is a Republican strategist but has been critical of Donald Trump. Well, let me start actually with you, Corey. What now?
Well, now Mr. Trump's got he's got a mandate to implement a very tough conservative agenda. It's our first time in many, many years. In fact, he's got a greater opportunity here to implement a conservative agenda in America than even Ronald Reagan. So we're very excited about this.
And what next?
Well, I think that the Republican Party needs to do some serious soul searching. You know, yes, we may have some policy victories moving forward potentially. I would be curious to say what exact conservative policies Donald Trump really ran on, because he's not really a Republican. But okay, Obamacare, you know, maybe the Supreme Court justices. Okay, but at what cost? I think that the Republican Party has really sold their political souls to support someone like Donald Trump, given the fact that he ran his entire candidacy on xenophobia, bigotry, and sexism. And I think that says something about us as American people. And I'm a lifelong conservative Republican who could not cast a ballot for Donald Trump, given his lack of character and integrity. But he's the president now.
Well, it's the Republicans who won. So clearly it's the Democrats who need to do the soul searching.
Did they, though, in quite the form that you would like them to have done? Because a great number of them deserted Trump altogether. They were offended by his appalling language and his behavior. Mm-hmm. And though, of course, they were still Republicans, they didn't believe in him.
A win is a win. And at the end of the day, the Republican Party, yes, there is a realignment of the parties going on. The Republican Party is becoming the party of the working man. It's becoming the party that wants to bring back manufacturing jobs. It's the party that wants to do something to enforce our border, to enforce our immigration laws. It's the party that is going to repeal and replace Obamacare because the cost of Obamacare is far too high in American businesses.
But in truth, hasn't this been quite literally a whitewash in which in a sense, the white heartland of America has now taken over the entire operation?
He won in very diverse states. He won in Pennsylvania, he won in Michigan, he won in
How do you answer that?
Florida.
I would say that Donald Trump won by increasing the white vote in this country. That's true. But he did also outperform Mitt Romney and John McCain when it came to minority votes, which was a surprise. Still not where we should be. I mean, the Republicans had the autopsy report in 2012, recognizing the demographic changes in this country, and that's undeniable. So this victory may be short-lived, because if the Republicans don't change their messaging and actually present conservatism in a way that doesn't have the tinge of racism that you had around Donald Trump.
Give me an example of something he could do to get you to work with him to become a united party.
Donald Trump would have to apologize and offer a mea culpa for all of the awful things that he has said about women, the fomenting of the alt-right, which is the racist underbelly of the alt-right fringe in this country. He needs to fully repudiate them. The fact that they feel so emboldened by his candidacy is alarming to people of color in this country, not only to people of color, but just to normal citizens in general. And he hasn't done that. So he has some serious healing to do that for people to even consider looking at him and giving him that opportunity. But it starts with him, and he'd have to change his character, which I haven't seen him do just yet.
Victors don't apologize. This part of the party...
Quite
leaders
honestly,
do. Actually,
surely
leaders
there are
do.
people in this country who've been deeply offended by material that he has uttered that has never been uttered in an English language contest. I would have said no.
I think I've seen some tapes of the Parliament. Look, building a wall is another way of saying we need to enforce our borders. Now, Britain, you don't have borders with any other nation. So therefore, you don't have to worry about this. But we do. We've got millions of people coming across the border, 2.1 million of whom are criminals, outright criminals.
But it was done in a dog whistle sort of a way. You know, it really kind of meant something more than a wall.
That's right. Tone matters. Tone matters. Words matter, especially when you're the leader of the free world. And when you throw, rhetorical bombs like Donald Trump did, it was to gin up emotion. So if we want, yes, I'm for border security. I worked on Capitol Hill for many years, and I worked on immigration reform, and in border security is one of my key issues. But if you want, then say you want border security. Don't say you're going to build a wall and then throw them all the hell out of here and deport them all. The way he did that, he fed into an emotional xenophobia, which I thought was terribly unfair, given that we really want the same results. So tone matters.
Well, look, it doesn't matter about the tone. What matters now is what we do with our power. Now, for at least the next 2 years, Republicans control the presidency, the House, and the Senate. It's time for border security. It's time to renegotiate some of our free trade agreements. I'm an international trade attorney. I know what I'm talking about here. They're unfair, especially with regard to China. We need to do something. We need to repeal and replace Obamacare. We have to get past all this rhetoric and start getting things done.
Let me just pause you there. Tone doesn't matter. So the leader of the free world can go on talking the way Donald Trump has talked.
You know, one thing that Europeans, my wife is a European, that they criticize Americans for is that we don't talk straight. We're not direct. Now, Donald Trump does. People find that refreshing that he speaks his mind.
Do you think there's just a possibility he might change?
I think that Donald Trump is a demagogue and that he's really, he's a populist, so he's going to, go whichever way the wind blows. But he is who he is. Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. And Donald Trump has shown us who he is many, many times underneath all of that bombast, and it concerns me. The attitude, like right now, about tone not mattering, we're just going to do it, that's not how you work in a constitutional republic. If you want to get things done, you have to reach across the aisle, and he's president of the United States for everyone. So many people, how divided this election was, he needs to be empathetic to those concerns for people if he wants to be a true leader. But this is new territory for him, and it's a risk for America, so I hope that he can step up to the plate for the good of our country.
Corey Stewart, thank you both very warmly for coming.
Thank you.
So what went wrong for Hillary Clinton? Never the most popular of candidates, it looked like she'd done enough to hold on to the states she needed to be assured of the keys to the White House. Her defeat was so shocking even to her that she could not bring herself to deliver the concession speech last night, US time, delaying that appearance in New York until just a few hours ago. Kylie Morris joins us now from New York. Kylie.
John, I watched that concession speech with strangers in tears next to me here in Manhattan. You can't overstate the shock that this has been to the Democratic Party and to Hillary Clinton's supporters. Now, the Democrats weren't quite measuring the curtains, but I think there was a real expectation that she would bring this home and succeed Barack Obama in the White House, that whatever her flaws, Donald Trump's were greater. But in the end, the Latino surge, her coalition of supporters, simply couldn't make this hers. Although we should say, as Matt has pointed out, that it looks like she did in fact accrue more popular votes than Donald Trump. In the end, though, it was a revolt by the Midwest that cost her the race and likely brought an end to her 30-year career in politics and perhaps the Clinton dynasty. Her convoy of limousines moved reluctantly through the streets of Manhattan, looking for all the world like a funeral cortege. Mourners waved as they passed, carrying Hillary Clinton to concede her loss before the cameras. Not Madam President, not today, not ever.
I know how disappointed you feel because I feel it too. And so do tens of millions of Americans who invested their hopes and dreams in this effort. This is painful, and it will be for a long time.
I just think this is one of the most amazing nights in political history.
Last night was a slow descent into hell for her Democratic Party. Supporters stood expectant, shoulder to shoulder, hopeful of victory. And in the beginning, that seemed reasonable enough.
Illinois goes to New Jersey, the most, as does Massachusetts.
Our teacher told us if we filled out a map, we'd get extra points on our tests, so I started filling it out. I think she's going to get it.
I'm a little more tense than she is, but I'm very cautiously optimistic.
Texas has been awarded to Kansas, Louisiana.
It's worrying.
Yes, on having an earlier night with this decided, we may have to really sweat it out as a nation.
There were moments of hope.
We have a major projection. In the state of Virginia, the projected winner is Hillary Clinton.
But it was short-lived.
It's not over yet. I mean, you have to look at the count. It's not looking good. And if it's him, I would like to think that somehow we'll make it through these next 4 years, and hopefully only 4 years. We got so much, and it's scary to watch him talk about all the things he wants to roll back.
Have you been speaking to people tonight, to Latino friends?
But there are people are concerned, and some people are saying to their family, we need to make a plan because we may not be safe. And not that they're going to leave the U.S., because these are now legal immigrants who are just afraid for their safety.
Donald Trump, if this holds, this is a major shift within the state of Michigan.
As it grew later, the Midwest ended Hillary's ambitions. States the Democrats had won before, but where she'd failed to get out the vote.
Donald Trump in the state of Ohio.
Places her campaign had labeled the Brexit states.
This is the seismic event of our political lifetime.
It's as though the air has been sucked out of this place. There is an immense sense of disappointment. They hired this place, in fact, because it has a glass ceiling in order to mark the election they were hoping of America's first woman president. But instead, there's not a crack in it, and the sky has fallen in. It's not just that Hillary Clinton has lost, but who she has lost to and how she has lost.
Everybody should head home. You should get some sleep.
It was 2:30 in the morning when her campaign chair told everyone to leave.
Right now, I'm a little embarrassed to be an American because there are a lot of really, really great people in this country. There's a lot of really great Trump supporters too, but I just don't like his message and it scares me.
Scared and sad. They trailed away from their party, which ended more like a wake. They did make history, but with cataclysmic defeat, rather than the inspirational victory they'd hoped for and expected. So what will a Trump presidency mean for the wider world? I'm joined now by our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum. Lindsay, they're talking about it here as a seismic shift. Is it a seismic shift internationally as well?
Oh, definitely. What diplomats are saying is that this could be the end of the West as we've known it since the end of World War II. In other words, the alliance of America and Western Europe with the same principles of international law and democracy in balance or opposition with Russia and China. Or that fundamental plank of the world order, they say, could well be broken. What Donald Trump is also talking about is a military build-up. He says that power should be going more to the Pentagon, away from the National Security Agency. We're talking about more soldiers, more aircraft carriers, but not to intervene in somewhere like Syria. That's gone. He doesn't want to know. It's an isolationist policy of military strength.
What about trade? I mean, we've heard him time and time again at his rallies as a cornerstone criticise America's international trade deals. How nervous are trade partners? Is he going to tear these things up?
Oh, they're terribly nervous, particularly Mexico and Canada with NAFTA, the trade agreement which ties the three countries together and which has brought prosperity. He says that's going to go. And China. Now, talk of a trade war with China. China is very powerful. America is in hock to China. China owns most of America's debt. It's not so easy to do what Donald Trump has campaigned on, which is to beat China and bring the jobs back. but he's also talking about tearing up treaties. NATO, he said that if the Russians, for example, were to invade one of the Baltic states, well, he's not sure if that's worth getting involved in. Well, that's the fundamental principle of NATO. An attack on one is an attack on all. The Iran nuclear deal, he wants to tear that up. Well, that might mean that Iran's nuclear program would start again, which might mean that the Gulf states start to develop nuclear weapons. The same in the South Pacific. He said that the nuclear Americans aren't going to guarantee that against North Korea. No wonder what people are talking about is Donald Trump as potentially reckless and very unpredictable.
Indeed, unpredictable, I think, is the key word. Thanks, Lindsay. Well, we'll be hearing in a moment about the very positive reaction from Moscow. But first, our foreign affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman, looks at how world leaders have responded to this electoral shock.
It's a victory greeted by many with astonishment, disbelief and fear, because Donald Trump's concept of America first has the potential to upset the entire world order. Some fumbled for the right words.
This is for sure a difficult moment in the relationship between the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union.
Others made no secret of their concern.
This American election opens a period of uncertainty. I have to face it with a clear head and clarity.
Today is the anniversary of Germany's Kristallnacht Jewish pogrom, as well as the fall of the Berlin Wall. So a conditional German welcome for a man who has threatened to ban Muslims and wall off Mexico.
Deutschland und Amerika sind durch Werte verbunden.
Germany and America are connected by values, democracy, freedom, respect for the law and for the dignity of human beings, independently of origin, skin colour, religion, gender, sexual orientation or political views. On the basis of these values, I'm offering the future President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, close cooperation.
The Mexican government spoke of cooperation too, even as their currency tumbled and they refused to pay for any new wall. While at this environmental summit in Morocco, protesters feared the global agreement on climate change would be scuppered by a president who has dismissed it as a hoax. His Twitter handle may be the real Donald Trump, but how much of what he said is real? As the superpower's new commander offered a nervous planet an olive branch this morning, it was impossible to say whether his claim that NATO was obsolete was a hoax as well.
Thank you. I want to tell the world community that while we will always put America's interests first, we will deal fairly with everyone, all people and all other nations.
President Erdogan of Turkey called Trump's election a positive sign, while Egypt's President Sisi was the first leader on the phone to him. A good day for Middle Eastern strongmen who didn't like Obama much anyway.
I would like to congratulate President Trump.
The famously foul-mouthed President Duterte of the Philippines said he and Trump were alike and swore regularly. Even as the South Korean government met in emergency session. If America tells the world to take care of itself, will real wars as well as trade wars follow? But for populist outsiders hoping to usurp the liberal establishment, this result is one they can only hope to copy.
I certainly believe it will be an enormous incentive for the common people to see, hey, it's possible. What can happen in America can happen in Europe, can happen in the Netherlands as well. So I'm sure it will have a positive effect.
The
decision of the American people must be greeted as a victory for freedom, the freedom of a sovereign people. We dare state again that the election of Donald Trump is good news for our country.
Donald Trump's win seems to foreshadow an America turning in even more on itself. But presidencies are made and broken by moments of unexpected crisis, by events from which it isn't so easy to walk away.
So now to Moscow. Donald Trump had expressed his admiration for Vladimir Putin during the campaign, and Russia was one of the first countries to welcome his victory. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, is in Moscow. Alex.
Yes, Moscow stands out, as Moscow and Russia sometimes do in these situations. This morning, President Vladimir Putin congratulated Donald Trump by telegram, don't you know? Perhaps that's because you can't hack a telegram. But as one politician in the Duma told us this morning, it is the person that Russia wanted in Donald Trump, because he said the person we knew before from the State Department, Hillary Clinton, and her cohorts were responsible for killing thousands and thousands of people around the world. They're out of the White House, they're out of power, he told us. So far as Vladimir Putin himself is concerned, though, yes, the obvious congratulations, he has to do that. But what was instructive was that they were hung about also with caveats and warnings.
The Kremlin is content. It wanted Trump, the unknown friend, not Clinton, the known foe. President Putin making the usual welcoming noises this morning, but warning that East-West relations won't be easy to warm up.
We understand that restoring relations between Russia and the US will be difficult, taking into account the current state of degradation of relations between the two countries. And, as I have repeatedly said, it's not our fault that Russian-American relations are in a poor state.
That said, social media in Russia sees equine, strategic and political bliss. Well, maybe. Russia's answer to Frank Sinatra, Joseph Kabzon. These days, he's an MP. We caught up with him in the Russian parliament this morning, the morning after the night before.
I'm happy because he's not a Russia hater. He's neutral about global affairs and frank about tax and migration policies.
On a day when history hangs heavy, here's the grandson of Stalin's foreign minister, Molotov, pressing home the message that Trump is good for Russia.
At least Mr. Trump does not have a long history of, misbehaving in Russia-American relations.
Which Hillary Clinton did, in your view?
Yeah, of course. She has a long history, which is her legacy as the state secretary, the legacy of Libya, legacy of Syria, of Iraq, Ukraine, of speaking ill about the leader of the Russian Federation, which Trump never did.
Some MPs, like one prominent anti-gay campaigner, simply see Donald Trump as an upholder of traditional conservative family values, a role model for the Russia they want to see.
I think that Donald Trump stands on a true family positions, and of course, he is not like...
He talks about assaulting women.
Okay, but he, from another hand, he stands on traditional positions, you know?
So the mood in the building behind me, the Duma, the Russian parliament, ranges from quiet optimism right through to outright joy today. And that, broadly speaking, will be reflected by officials across the square in the building over there. It's the Kremlin. Put simply, Russia's view is that the world will be a safer place under President Trump than it ever would have been under President Hillary Clinton.
Alex Thompson in Moscow, where we're joined now by the British writer and New York Magazine's contributing editor, Andrew Sullivan, a political conservative but social liberal who has been urging Americans not to vote for Donald Trump. They have. And I think one of the things which I find extraordinary is that you've just written overnight this article which said the Republic repeals itself. How so?
Well, I think this is a moment where America was always built on self-government, taking care of yourself, keeping the government at bay. And what's happened is that people decided they want to throw over the entire government to one man, one person who will fix it all for them, as he put. I alone can fix it. This is the desire to get rid of all these troubles, to fix the gridlock in Washington and give it to a new king.
But doesn't the American Constitution, which many of us actually really rather revere, build in all these checks and balances? Supreme Court, Senate, Congress. I know Republicans control them, but they're split.
No, they're not split. They're certainly not split now. Now that he's won a victory, you saw in the campaign...
Well, we just had one on tonight. I mean, she's not in either of the houses, but she must represent the sort of voice...
No, they're gone. They're absolutely gone. There'll be a purge of those who resist at all. This is a huge victory for him. He's done it entirely on his own terms. The party tried to stop it. They've been destroyed by him. This is his party. He has the House and the Senate, probably the Senate and the House for the next 8 years, given the way trends are running. And they held open the vacancy on the Supreme Court, prevented Obama from having that extra seat, so they control the court forever. They've got everything. There is nothing to stop him whatsoever in the system unless the character and the virtue of people in that system resist it.
But you talk party, you talk Republican Party, but he's not a party man. He's never been a member of the Republican Party for any length of time. He's voted Democrat. He's given money to Mrs. Clinton in the past. I mean, how is he going to get hold of the levers of political nuance that
because
parties
he's got the
out?
base. The reason they were unable to stand up to him in the campaign is because the voters of the Republican Party base worship him. They worship and have connected with him in a way that no other leader has connected with them in decades. Their loyalty is total, and the congressmen and the senators can't go against their own constituents because those constituents are angry. They will primary ones. In other words, they'll put up a more right-wing candidate to primary them. Paul Ryan's future as Speaker, I think, is incredibly dark. I think that he will purge, as he's promised to purge. They already have an enemies list. They're going to get rid of the Republicans who stood up against them.
Will he actually do all the things that he said he'd do? It wasn't an awful lot of it bluster. Wasn't it a lot of it pantomime, macabre though it may have been? The wall, the Muslim issue, everything.
Yes, let's hope. Let's hope.
Well,
we don't know. He might abandon it all. And that's what a lot of Republican friends say is, don't worry, he's not going to do any of this. My point is, when you've revved up half the country around these issues, when you've made explicit promises to deport 11 million people, to build a wall, to start a trade war, to discriminate and subject American Muslims to extra surveillance, how do you go back on that? He's as much a creature now of the mob as they are of him.
Let's end then on Mrs. Clinton. I mean, was she the wrong candidate? Could the other man in the White House, Biden, he could have done it, couldn't he?
Yes. I think Biden could have done it. I begged Biden to run last year. I think Clinton was always a useless mediocrity, had no ability to connect with people, no ability to inspire people, a symbol of everything in Washington people hate. And so rather than have that, at the last minute, they decided, let's throw a bomb into the entire system and blow it up. And the trouble is the world may blow up as a result.
Going to leave the country?
Absolutely not. I stay and fight.
Andrew Sullivan, thank you very much indeed for joining us now. As after the Brexit vote, here, the election of Donald Trump sparked a knee-jerk reaction on the markets, but initial falls were not sustained. So what does a Trump presidency mean for the world economy? We're joined from the City of London now by our business correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi. Helia.
John, I think, ironically, you're right, Brexit has been front of mind for a lot of investors, many of whom sold too fast, too hard back in June. They didn't want that to happen today, which is why everything from the FTSE 100 to the Dow Jones is up as trading floors entered this almost stupefied pause.
It's been a bit of a bungee jump, isn't it? We've just seen Donald Trump give a very conciliatory speech. He's talking about unifying the country. And maybe people thinking, well, do you know what? Do you know, maybe it won't be quite so radical after all. Well, we don't know. He doesn't take power until January.
25 BTP, 24, 22.
We simply don't know. We've never seen a candidate like Donald Trump, and it is very, very likely we won't see a president like Donald Trump either.
If we take a step back and take a look at some of those election promises, they have massive consequences for not just global growth, but could also spark international trade wars. Take a look at his idea to boost protectionist tariffs against China. Over the last 20 years, the trade deficit with China has gone up tenfold. Now, US laborers may applaud putting up barriers, but for consumers, it's going to cost them more. And by the way, China is a country that owns 68 cents in every dollar of US debt, and they're none too pleased about the inauguration of a president who's toyed with the idea of reneging on that debt. But it doesn't end there. Trump has also threatened to tear up NAFTA. That is the main trade agreement between the US, Canada, and crucially Mexico. And the deal, the negotiations with the Pacific Rim on trade doesn't look good, while quite frankly, the ones with Europe look dead in the water. But there are some positive sounds that that traders have been clinging to today as well. Things like stimulus package, not just in terms of building roads, but the massive tax break that Trump has promised American companies like Apple to repatriate their foreign profits back home. Now, that cash hoard is estimated to be worth something like $2.5 trillion. So we're talking about a massive boost to the US economy. The question remains, by January, when he's inaugurated, how many of these promises or threats will he actually go through with? And until we know that, the markets will remain in limbo.
Say America in diplomatic circles in Britain, and you hear the words special relationship. The British government had been careful to keep its options open ahead of the vote, and Theresa May was quick to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory. But how will the two leaders work together? Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Downing Street. Gary, they've been gaming this, haven't they?
They have indeed. It's very interesting to hear what Theresa May had to say in welcoming Donald Trump today. Compare and contrast with what you heard Chancellor Merkel say earlier in the programme. It was a pretty thinly veiled rebuke to Donald Trump in her welcome to him, ticking him off effectively for offensive language used during the campaign. From Theresa May, nothing of the sort. That, they say here, is because they want a forward-looking relationship. Other people will feel it's perhaps because they're a little bit too forgiving, too needy, perhaps. This is what Theresa May had to say.
I look forward to working with President-elect Trump. The American people have elected him as the next President of the United States. Britain and the United States share values of freedom, of democracy and enterprise, and I look forward to building on the special relationship we have between our two countries to ensure the security and prosperity of our two nations in the future.
There's a hope in Number 10 that they can make something out of this relationship, and they want to treat it just like any other US president being elected. Donald Trump hasn't courted foreign leaders. People don't know that much about what really goes on inside his mind, behind the tweets, as it were. But there is a hope here that maybe he likes Britain. He's certainly said that he likes Brexit. And maybe by developing relations on areas where there is a mutual agreement, say on the idea that countries should contribute to NATO, pull their weight, as it were, then perhaps Britain can be heard when it comes to, say, the central purposes of NATO, where there is a worry around Whitehall that Donald Trump isn't remotely signed up to that. So, on the surface, very much an ordinary welcome, as if he was any other president coming to office. They're waiting for a slot when Theresa May can talk to him on the phone, saying they're as keen as mustard to actually walk through the door of the Oval Office as soon as possible when he's there. Very much a normal welcome on the surface, but when you talk to officials privately, they look like Edvard Munch's The Scream and make anguished faces at you behind the scenes.
Gary Gibbon reporting. Well, now, just one more very sombre item of news tonight from London. At least 7 people were killed when a rush hour tram derailed at speed in South London this morning. More than 50 others were injured, and the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has warned that the number of deaths could well rise. Diana Magney has this.
There was a sharp bend in the tracks where the tram came off the rails, filled with early morning commuters, 7 of whom are now dead, many more injured.
We have transported over 50 patients to a number of hospitals, those being St George's and Croydon University Hospital. Most of those patients were walking wounded, but there are, however, a number of patients with some serious injuries.
Martin Bamford is one of those walking wounded. He broke several ribs and damaged his pelvis. He takes the tram each morning, he says, and knew as they approached the bend that something was very wrong.
At the point we were at, we should have been slowing down, and if anything we were speeding up, and then we hit that bend, and literally from then everything just flipped over, everyone was everywhere. There was claret, phones, shoes, bodies everywhere.
The 42-year-old driver from Beckenham has been arrested. Investigators say he was driving significantly faster than the 12 miles per hour permitted around sharp bends, and are looking into whether he fell asleep at the controls. London's Mayor, Sadiq Khan, came to pay his respects.
My prayers, my thoughts are with family members and loved ones, but also I want to pay tribute to the hard-working men and women behind me who'll be working when it gets dark as well to make sure the recovery part of this operation is a success as it can be.
Britain hasn't had loss of life on this scale on its railways since the Potters Bar crash in 2002. And with several still with life-threatening injuries, the death toll could rise further.
Diana Magnay reporting. Now, for Democrats and many women across the world, last night was supposed to see the shattering of the big symbolic gender glass ceiling, a woman finally getting into the Oval Office. But after years of public service preparing for the role, Hillary Clinton failed to achieve that dream last night. As the polls closed, I made my way across Washington to one of the oldest women's clubs in America, the Women's National Democratic Club, founded soon after they got the right to vote.
That there are jitters here among top Clinton supporters.
Inside the club, the mood was already tense, in some places somber. There was a constant drip-drip from the TV commentators on the screens of Clinton's failing prospects. By midnight, as they began to desert the tables, the reality of her loss was sinking right home.
I'm from the South. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and I went through the civil rights movement. 3 of the little girls who were killed in the church bombing were friends of mine. He is taking us back to that era. I don't know what I would do. I've actually thought about moving out of the country, and I really don't know what I will do. I'm going to have trouble calling him my president. I have been proud to be a U.S. citizen since the day I was born, and I will not be proud to be a U.S. citizen. It says a lot about this country that I am ashamed of.
A mile across town, the Trump Hotel, press forbidden. But outside, arriving women rejected the whole idea of a woman president, as idealized by the liberal elite.
What does it say about Hillary Clinton? It says we have had enough of the Clintons, and we do not want
we don't need to go back to the Clintons, for crying out loud.
Honest, corrupt woman as president.
Yeah.
Yes, and the sex scandal.
No, I really don't. I don't vote down here.
You don't want a woman president?
No,
I don't.
not this
No,
one,
I
not
don't
this one.
vote with my sex.
Not this one. Not this one.
And especially not her.
Not this one.
Why is Trump the president? Why?
Outside the White House, hundreds of students chanted expletive deleted slogans damning Trump. Is it the shock or the fear?
Both.
Both.
It's everything.
It's all of them.
I think we wanted a woman president, and we're not going to get that now.
A racist.
Like, it just blows my mind, because I woke up this morning and it's like, at the end of the day, I'm going to go to the White House and I'm going to celebrate the fact that I'm going to have a female president, and I'm finally going to have a strong role model.
The tears and jeers of these protesting students, so many miles from Middle America's disillusion, unable to comprehend this whitewash of a backlash. Their own familiarity with diversity, equality, compassion and joy, those were not the words of Donald Trump's campaign. After the break, we'll be talking to the writer Irving Welsh, who's in Chicago. And he says the forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer, Mr. Trump. But we spend the evening with a group of workers who think that promise is aimed at them. So Donald Trump's unexpected triumph last night is a testament to the level of frustration and anger felt by what used to be called blue-collar America. Last night, rural America and parts of the white working class cheered on as Donald Trump took state after state. They talk openly of this being their Brexit follow-on moment. Last night, Inigo Gilmore spent the evening with a group of firemen, ex-cops and factory workers who feel empowered by Trump.
To introduce to you the president.
A bar in the heart of Staten Island. It's a mood of pure jubilation. Working men and women like these were at the vanguard of Donald Trump's victory, a man who they believe will save their beautiful America. People here feel they finally have someone who speaks for them.
America finally woke up, stepped out to the polls, and they're sick and tired of the same old thing.
firefighters and ex-cops drink here, a world away from the skyscrapers and what they call the hoity-toity elite of Manhattan. The anger towards the Democrats and Hillary Clinton is at times visceral. They chant one of Trump's most catchy campaign slogans: "Lock her up." We met Mike, a factory worker and union member who came from a traditionally Democratic family.
The Democratic Party years ago was always for working class people like you see in this bar. It's not for that no more. Everything's been taken away from the hard-working man. We built this country.
For Mike and many here, the election was about regaining the past.
Donald Trump, you know, he's not the perfect candidate, but he speaks like we speak. He speaks from the heart.
The firefighters here agreed.
Killed 9/11 and firefighters going Trump, baby. Trump!
As Trump took to the stage, it was time to celebrate a victory for supporters who'd been calling themselves the silent majority, now newly empowered.
We won, you lost. Now you deal with us.
And now the other half of America will have to learn how to deal with Trump and his assertive supporters.
Well, we're joined now from Chicago by a novelist and playwright, Irvine Welsh. Irvine Welsh, thank you very much for joining us. White
Pleasure, John.
working class, everybody's talking about them in America, the blue-collar worker. They're all spread out in the states below you there in Chicago. How do you read this Trump victory?
Very much the same as Brexit, and I think that you have to remember that for a lot of people, for kind of sort of middle class, kind of sort of media savvy people, this is a big crisis. Like Brexit was a big crisis, but for a lot of people, the big crisis has been happening for 30 years. You know, it's kind of, I mean, people in Sunderland and Wolverhampton and Merthyr Tydfil, you know, these communities have been destroyed by neoliberalism for the last 30 years, and very much the same with the communities here. And the Rust Belt Midwest communities in particular, where Trump was very successful. And it's so ironic that with the dismantling of trade unions and the emasculation of union power, the lowering of wages, and the kind of general depoliticization of society into a kind of media, into a media soundbite society, the only opposition kind of, or the only perceived opposition comes from the, you know, people's tendency to herd around the kind of loudest mouth kind of school bully, basically, thinking that he's going to protect them from this very uncertain world that we live in with the collapse of our kind of our traditional economy. It's not going to happen, but you can see that in desperation, I think so many people just did want change. I mean, it's like it's 35 years since Ronald Reagan's shock election, and you know, it's like kind of that was kind of 35 years on from the post-war and the post-war consensus. This is another shock now. This is the kind of basically the end of neoliberalism, and we're moving into potentially quite a kind of dark fascistic era.
Irvine, the sequitur to that is your statement, I think often made, which is that there are tremendous parallels between the Democrat Party and Labour in their neglect of the working classes and their dash for neoliberalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big there's a big conversation to be had, but it's not this very facile like Labour or the Democrats have got to reconnect with the working class communities. The working class communities have left Labour and the Democrats and are positively very hostile to them and everything they perceive that they stand for. And you got that kind of from the people in your feature, and the consequences of doing that are very kind of dark as well, because it kind of, if you do that, you alienate other people too. And I think, you know, the whole thing now is to start to empower people and give them opportunities. And I think that, you know, the false dawn of embracing this kind of fascistic kind of politics isn't going to do anybody any good. It's not going to do the people that have embraced it any good. But you can see why, in the absence of everything else, they did embrace it. I mean, if you look at the election statistics, most of the lower income people in America voted for Hillary Clinton. Now, it's a bit obscene that kind of skilled workers and middle-class people are voting for a kind of toy town fascist like Trump.
Yeah.
But in some ways, it's equally obscene that the very poorest of the poor are voting for this Wall Street kind of poster girl.
Well, right.
But you know, so
yeah.
it's you know,
Irvin,
so there is nobody's coming out
Irvin,
well out of this.
You've made a very strong case. Irvin, in a very strong case, can I just ask you in one word, are you going to leave the country?
No, I mean, I
talking
kind of
to us
think
there
that,
from Chicago. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm afraid we have to leave it there, Irvin. I said one word. Thank you very much. The momentous 24 hours. That's Channel 4 News. Good evening from Washington.